On the night of February 24th, 1978, 5 young men from Yuba City, California, left a basketball game and started the drive home. They never arrived. Months later, 4 of their bodies were found in the frozen mountains of Plumas National Forest, 70 miles from where they should have been. The 5th man vanished without a trace and has never been found. This is the story of the Yuba County Five, a mystery that has haunted investigators for over 4 decades. But this isn't the story you've heard before. For years, this case has been told through a lens of tragedy and helplessness. 5 men with developmental disabilities who somehow got lost and died in the wilderness. The narrative was neat, sad, and easy to file away, except it was never that simple. Gary Mathias was an Army veteran with survival training. Jack Madruga was a careful driver who knew these roads. Bill Sterling never took unnecessary risks. Jack Hewitt and Ted Weiher were responsible men with jobs and routines. Together, they were the Gateway Gators, a basketball team that gave them identity, purpose, and brotherhood. They had every reason to drive straight home that night. Their own tournament was scheduled for the next morning, yet something made them turn onto a remote mountain highway. Something made them drive their car miles up an impassable road. Something made them abandon a working vehicle with gas in the tank and walk 19 miles through snow into the wilderness. And something kept Ted Weiher trapped inside a Forest Service trailer filled with food and heat for months until he starved to death. What could terrify 5 men enough to choose the mountains over the safety of their car? New evidence suggests they weren't lost. They were running, and the only witness who claimed to see them that night, a man named Joseph Shones, may have been the reason why. This is the truth about what happened on that mountain road, and it's time someone finally told it. The 5 men who vanished into the Sierra Nevada on February 24th, 1978, were not tragic figures defined by their limitations. They were friends, workers, athletes, men with routines, responsibilities, and dreams that extended far beyond the labels doctors and case files assigned them. Gary Mathias was perhaps the most enigmatic of the group, a paradox that would later consume investigators. At 25, he carried himself with a quiet confidence born from Army service in Germany, where he'd learned survival skills and developed the kind of street-smart awareness that came from navigating military life and its aftermath. His schizophrenia, when managed with medication, and the structured routine he'd carefully built, didn't define him. It was simply part of the architecture of his daily life. His psychiatrist had been clear. Gary was stable, functional, together. He was the protector in the group, the one friends looked to when situations got complicated, which made his role in what happened that February night all the more haunting. Why would Gary, of all people, drive into danger? And why was he the only one whose body was never found? Jack Madruga was 30, the driver, the responsible one. His turquoise and white Mercury Montego wasn't just transportation. It was pride, proof of independence, something he maintained with meticulous care. Jack knew these roads the way you know the rooms of your own house, having driven them for work, for pleasure, for years. Those who knew him understood one unshakable truth. Jack would never willingly take his beloved car up a mountain road in winter conditions. He would never risk damaging it on snow and ice. If the Mercury ended up where it did, Jack was either following someone, fleeing something, or being forced. Bill Sterling, at 29, lived in his own apartment, and managed the careful balance of work and independence. Friends described him as cautious to a fault, someone who planned, who avoided risks, who would never embark on an unplanned winter adventure. Jack Hewitt was the social heart of the group, friendly and open, the kind of person who made connections easily. That trusting nature, that willingness to believe in the goodness of strangers, may have been his undoing. Then there was Ted Weiher. At 32 and well over 200 pounds, Ted was particular about comfort and routine. He hated being cold. He needed his own bed, his own space, the predictable rhythms of home. The thought of Ted voluntarily spending even one night in the freezing mountains was absurd to everyone who knew him. Yet he would be found there months later, having survived longer than anyone thought possible in conditions he would have done anything to avoid. These 5 men shared something beyond friendship: purpose. At Gateway Projects, their vocational training program, they'd found community and identity. The Gateway Gators basketball team wasn't just recreation. It was proof of capability, of belonging. They'd made it to championships. They were going to play in the Special Olympics tournament the next day, a game they'd talked about for weeks. On February 24th, they'd driven to Chico to watch a basketball game, an away game send-off for their own upcoming victory. They'd been seen leaving around 10 that evening, heading home to Yuba City, a route they'd driven countless times. They had every reason to go straight home, every reason to wake up the next morning ready to play. Something stopped them. Something turned 5 men with everything to live for into one of America's most disturbing unsolved mysteries. When searchers found Jack Madruga's Mercury Montego on February 28th, for days after the men vanished, they discovered something far more disturbing than an empty vehicle. They found evidence of intention without explanation, decisions without logic, and the beginning of a mystery that deepened with every answer. The car sat near Rogers Cow Camp, a remote hunting area that became a frozen wasteland in winter. Someone had driven it past a gate, past barriers, past a sign that clearly warned, impassable when wet, and nosed it deliberately into a snowbank on a mountain road where it had no business being. Inside, the scene was maddeningly normal. The interior showed no signs of struggle, no panic, no violence. The car had a quarter tank of gas, enough to run the heater for days, enough to keep 5 men alive through the worst of the February cold. There were no mechanical problems. Investigators would later drive it down the mountain without incident. But the keys were gone. Someone had locked the Mercury and taken the keys, as if planning to return, as if this was temporary. Why would 5 men, one of them an experienced driver who cherished this car, abandon a warm, working vehicle to walk into a snowstorm? The answer, or the absence of one, waited 19 miles up the mountain. In June, when melting snow finally allowed a thorough search, investigators found the Forest Service trailer. Inside was everything needed for survival. Propane heaters that still worked, sear rations and canned food neatly stored, a loaf of bread, matches, candles, blankets, sleeping bags. It was a shelter that could have saved lives. On the bed lay Ted Weiher's body. The autopsy revealed a timeline of suffering that defied comprehension. Ted had lived for 8 to 13 weeks after the disappearance, through March, possibly into April, while search parties looked for him, while his family waited, while spring gradually replaced winter. He had lost 80 to 100 pounds from his already large frame. His feet showed severe frostbite, consistent with walking 19 miles through snow. He died of hypothermia and starvation in a room filled with food he never ate and heat he never turned on. The psychological horror of it consumed investigators. Why hadn't Ted saved himself? Theories multiplied but satisfied no one. Was he too injured to reach the supplies? Too traumatized to function? Was he hiding from someone outside? Did mental paralysis freeze him as surely as the cold? As spring progressed, the mountain yielded more bodies. Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling were found in the forest. Their remains skeletal, suggesting they died of exposure within days or weeks of leaving the car. Jack Hewitt's remains emerged separately, also victim to the elements. All three showed signs of having traveled on foot through deep snow, their bodies scattered across the wilderness like pieces of an unsolvable puzzle. Gary Mathias was never found. His absence became its own testimony, a void that raised different questions than the bodies did. Gary had Army survival training. Gary knew how to endure, to adapt, to survive. Did he escape something that trapped the others? Was he taken? Did he die somewhere the mountain kept secret? The evidence map made no sense. How had they traveled 19 miles through February snow? Why separate? What prevented Ted from using the supplies that could have saved him? What terror or compulsion was powerful enough to drive 5 men from a warm car into a frozen wilderness where 4 would die and 1 would vanish completely? The mountain held evidence everywhere, but the truth remained absent. Joseph Shones appeared in the investigation like an answer to a prayer, the only person who claimed to have seen the missing men on the night they vanished. But his testimony, examined closely, raises more questions than it resolves, and casts a shadow of suspicion that never quite lifts. Shones was 55, Yuba City podiatrist, buying a vacation home in the area. His account seemed straightforward at first. He'd suffered a heart attack while driving on Mountain Road, veered off near Rogers Cow Camp, and spent a terrifying night stranded in his car. During that night, he claimed he saw the Mercury Montego and other vehicles. He saw men with flashlights moving through the forest. He watched headlights, heard voices, witnessed what might have been the last movements of 5 doomed men. Unable to help, suffering cardiac distress, he survived until morning and walked to Mountain House Lodge to report what he'd seen. It was compelling testimony. It was also full of holes. Start with medical reality. Shones claimed severe heart attack symptoms, chest pain, distress significant enough to cause him to lose control of his vehicle. Yet he survived a freezing February night in a car without heat, then walked several miles through snow to reach help. Medical experts reviewing the case have questioned whether someone in genuine cardiac crisis could endure those conditions. The human body in heart failure doesn't typically manage extended cold exposure followed by strenuous hiking. Either Shones's heart attack was less severe than claimed, or something else entirely was happening. Then there were the details that wouldn't stay fixed. Between interviews, Shones's story shifted like snow and wind. Sometimes he mentioned a red pickup truck that searchers never found. Sometimes his description of the flashlights suggested organized searching or pursuit rather than confused wandering. His timeline bent and flexed in ways that made investigators uneasy, each retelling subtly different from the last. His behavior at Mountain House Lodge that morning troubled witnesses. They described him as agitated, evasive, more concerned with his own situation than with reporting men potentially dying in the forest. He didn't immediately alert anyone to the stranded vehicle or the figures he'd seen in the woods. His requests seemed strange, his priorities misaligned with someone who'd just witnessed a potential tragedy. And then there was the coincidence itself, the sheer statistical improbability of Joseph Shones being at the exact location where 5 men would be found dead or missing at the exact moment they disappeared, in a remote area on a winter night, in conditions that kept most sensible people far away. Researcher Tony Wright's analysis suggests a darker possibility, that Shones wasn't a witness but a participant. Perhaps he and accomplices staged a breakdown or emergency, luring the men into stopping. Perhaps robbery or harassment followed, sending the terrified group fleeing into the forest. That red pickup truck Shones mentioned might have been real, a vehicle used to chase or corner them, forcing Jack to drive past barriers and warnings in desperate flight. The heart attack narrative could have been manufactured afterward, a convenient explanation for why Shones was found at the scene, why he seemed distressed, why his story never quite aligned with physical evidence. Shones died in 2019, 41 years after that February night. His family insists he was a victim, not a perpetrator, another person traumatized by proximity to tragedy. But the evidence whispers otherwise. His testimony remains the only direct account of what happened to the Yuba County Five, and it's the testimony of a man whose presence at the scene defies innocent explanation, whose story collapses under scrutiny, who may have known exactly what happened because he helped make it happen. Whatever truth Joseph Shones carried, he took it to the grave. The disappearance of the Yuba County Five didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened in a community where vulnerability attracted predators, where difference invited cruelty, and where the men of Gateway Projects had learned to navigate a world that didn't always welcome them. Harassment was not hypothetical for these men. It was documented, recurring, inevitable. Gateway Projects clients faced bullying, intimidation, and assault in Yuba City and the surrounding areas with disturbing regularity. They were visible targets, recognizable by their association with the program, identifiable by behaviors or speech patterns that marked them as different. The Yuba County Five had been harassed before, particularly when traveling away from the familiar safety of their neighborhoods. They knew what it felt like to be followed, taunted, threatened by people who saw their disability as permission for cruelty. 1 year after the 5 men vanished, another Gateway Projects client named Donald Garrett was murdered. His death in 1979 was ruled suspicious, but never solved. The investigation leading nowhere, the truth buried with him. The proximity is impossible to ignore. 2 tragedies, 1 year apart, both targeting men from the same vulnerable population, both remaining mysteries. Was there a pattern? Was someone hunting the men of Gateway Projects, seeing them as easy victims who wouldn't be believed, whose deaths wouldn't be thoroughly investigated, whose disappearances might be dismissed as accidents born of their own limitations? Investigators have long entertained what they call the town bully theory, the possibility that the men encountered local troublemakers on the night of February 24th, young men looking for entertainment at someone else's expense. These weren't theoretical villains. There were known incidents of what authorities grimly termed thrill harassment, where locals would follow Gateway Projects clients, intimidate them, turn their fear into sport. Perhaps it started as it always started, catcalls, insults, a vehicle pulling too close, laughter at someone else's distress. Perhaps it escalated when the 5 men tried to leave, when Jack pressed the accelerator, when what had been fun for the pursuers became a chase. And then it became deadly. Then 5 men were dying in the mountains, and the bullies who'd started it faced a choice: come forward and admit involvement in multiple deaths, or stay silent and hope the truth stayed buried in snow. They chose silence. If they're still alive, they're choosing it still. Even Gateway Projects itself wasn't safe. Years later, the facility was destroyed by arson under circumstances that were never fully explained. Was someone trying to erase evidence? Send a message about who belonged in the community and who didn't. Eliminate a place that gave vulnerable people visibility and voice. The question that haunts every theory returns. Why did the men drive into the mountains? But perhaps they weren't lost. Perhaps they were hiding. If they believed they were being pursued, if headlights followed too close, if voices shouted threats, if they'd learned from experience that stopping meant confrontation, the mountain road might have seemed like escape. They might have thought they could outlast their pursuers in the darkness and cold. They might have believed help was closer than it was, that the trailer or a ranger station waited just ahead. They might have been so frightened that hypothermia seemed preferable to whatever waited behind them on the road. They might have been running from something worse than winter, and winter killed them anyway. At 9:30 on the evening of February 24th, 1978, 5 friends left Bears Market in Chico with snacks and high spirits, talking about tomorrow's basketball tournament. They had every reason to drive straight home to Yuba City, every reason to wake up ready to play the game they'd anticipated for weeks. Within hours, they would be dead or missing, victims of decisions that still defy complete understanding. The critical moment came around 10 o'clock when, instead of taking Highway 70 toward home, they turned onto the Oroville-Quincy highway heading into the mountains. This wasn't confusion. Jack Madruga knew these roads. This was intention, without clear motive, unless they were following someone. Perhaps they believed someone needed help, a stranded motorist, a staged emergency designed to draw good Samaritans into danger. Perhaps they were being pursued and took the turn to evade followers who'd been harassing them since Chico. Perhaps they were lured by someone they trusted or someone posing as authority. By 10:30, something happened on that mountain road that changed concern into terror. Whether they encountered Joseph Shones and possible accomplices who robbed and threatened them, whether a red pickup truck chased them past barriers and warnings, whether they witnessed something that made them targets, the result was the same. 5 men faced genuine danger and made a survival calculation: abandon the warm car and hide in the forest. It explains everything that made no sense. They locked the Mercury and took the keys to prevent pursuit. They traveled 19 miles uphill, moving away from whatever threatened them below. They split up to increase the chances that someone would survive to tell the story, to get help, to bring justice. In the first days, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, and Jack Hewitt succumbed to hypothermia. Without proper clothing or equipment, facing temperatures that dropped below freezing every night, their bodies simply gave out. They died in the forest, scattered, alone. Ted Weiher and possibly Gary Mathias reached the trailer. Ted got inside, his feet already destroyed by frostbite from the long walk through snow. Gary, with his military survival training, may have tried to scout for safety or seek help, and vanished into the mountains, never to be found. Ted remained in the trailer through March and into April, his body consuming itself, his mind perhaps broken by trauma and exposure. He died surrounded by food he couldn't bring himself to eat, heat he couldn't make himself use, trapped by psychological paralysis as surely as by the winter outside. Joseph Shones spun his witness story to explain his presence at the scene, claiming heart attack and helplessness. If accomplices existed, they chose silence over accountability. The case was ruled accidental death by exposure, a conclusion that required no investigation into foul play, no search for perpetrators, no uncomfortable questions about who might have driven 5 men to their deaths. The questions remain haunting and unanswered. Where is Gary Mathias? Who else was on that mountain that night? What did Joseph Shones really see or do? Will anyone ever face justice for 5 stolen lives? Ted Weiher wanted to be home in his own bed. Jack Madruga loved his car and drove it with pride. Bill Sterling was careful and risk-averse. Jack Hewitt trusted easily and made friends. Gary Mathias had survived military service and was managing his life with competence and determination. They were sons, brothers, friends, athletes. They had jobs and routines and dreams. They deserved to come home from a basketball game. They deserved to play in their tournament. They deserved to grow old. Instead, they vanished into silence, their deaths dismissed by some as inevitable tragedy, the natural result of disabled men making poor choices. But the evidence tells a different story, one of fear, pursuit, and deliberate harm, one of a community that failed to protect its most vulnerable members, that allowed predators to operate with impunity, that closed the case before justice could be served. How many others have vanished into similar silence, their deaths dismissed because they were easy to ignore? The dark car in the reference photo, the foggy silhouettes, the eerie atmosphere, all of it now reads as memorial rather than mystery. 5 faces full of life, frozen in time before the night that took them. To Ted, Jack M., Bill, Jack H., and Gary, your story will not be forgotten. Your lives mattered. Rest in peace.